So welcome everybody to this session, and I'm going to be, as I said, I'm going to talk to you about some of the foundations of value pricing, how we can move to value pricing, how we can get some quick wins, some quick results. But before I dive into that, I thought I'd just share with you just a bit about my background in case you have no idea who I am. So my name is Mark Wickersham, and I'm an accountant. I'm a chartered accountant, been in this profession now for, over 30 years I've been in the profession. I left university way back in 1988. I went to work for a large multi-partner firm in Sheffield in the UK, qualified as a chartered accountant after 3 years, spent 3 years doing tax, became a corporation tax manager. And then a bit later, in May 96, decided that I would start my own accounting firm, which was an exciting time for me. Sole practitioner, no clients. And if you were watching my practice way back then in 96, over the next few years, you might have thought that I was a successful accountant building a big firm, because I grew fast over the next 2.5, 3 years. I grew from 0 clients to over 200 clients. I grew a team of people. I moved from an office in a bedroom to bigger premises and then bigger ones. However, the reality was, by the end of 1998, 2.5 years into my accounting firm, my life was a mess. I found that by the end of 98, I was just working crazy hard, crazy long hours. I found that I was only just making enough money to get by, to pay the bills, to pay the mortgage. My debts were spiraling out of control because I was going back to the bank all the time asking for increases to my overdrafts, new loans, as I was building this practice. And fortunately, at the end of 1990, I met somebody who became a good friend of mine. His name's Steve Pipe. I spent 3 days at his accountant's masterclass, and that changed everything for me. I realized there was a better way of running an accounting firm. I then, during 99, met a few other of my heroes, Paul Dunn, who was running the Accountants Bootcamp, and he introduced me to Ron Baker in 99. And it was Ron Baker, another friend of mine and one of my heroes, who introduced me to this concept of value pricing. I'd never heard of value pricing before, had no idea what it was. I'd grown up in the accounting profession believing that we had to keep timesheets, that we had to bill based on the hour. And so that's exactly what I did and struggled. And then Ron explained to me at the end of 99 what value pricing meant. And for me, this light bulb went on. It made complete sense to me. And so I started making changes to my accounting firm and had some results, some immediate results. And a bit later on, I'll share with you the very first thing I did, in my accounting firm, as I started to move away from hourly billing, timesheets, and moving towards value pricing. So that's coming up. I'll share that with you. I was then able to, my practice then changed completely. Over the next couple of years, as I got better at pricing, I then turned this complete mess of a practice into something that was profitable. And I was then able to sell it to my client managers, Steve and Jonathan. They bought it from me a few years later in a management buyout. Steve and Jonathan still run the practice to this very day. I believe they haven't changed the name. It's still, I believe, called Wickersham's. I think it's somewhere in the Sheffield area. I'm now in Portugal, by the way. I left the UK last year. I live in Portugal, but I believe the practice still exists. I was also very fortunate that because of all the changes I was making, Steve Pipe asked me to speak to at his first conference in the year 2000. And something I said must have resonated about the changes I was making in my firm, the results I was getting, that Steve asked me to come back and speak at every one of his events. We went into business together for a while. We ran AVN for a decade, which was great fun, until Steve retired. And I then moved on a few years back and founded the Value Pricing Academy. So what I do now is I teach people value pricing. I work with accounting firms all around the world, predominantly the UK, Canada, the US, and South Africa. And in my academy, I work with over 500 firms, teaching them every single month how to master value pricing. And those firms that are doing that are getting significantly better results. I'm seeing firms that are able to double their prices and sometimes much more. And if that sounds almost impossible. I'm going to share with you some thoughts on how you do that. There are many firms who are moving away from the old-fashioned way of billing based on the hour, who are now on this journey towards value pricing and getting significantly better results. Okay, so that's background to me and where I've come from and what I now do. I only teach value pricing. So let's start with the first thing I want to talk about, which is, what does value really mean? Because there's a lot of confusion as to what value is. And let's start with a definition of value pricing. You see, there are many, many different pricing models out there, and you'll have heard of many of these, and it can get very confusing. So time-based billing is a pricing model. There's time-based billing, menu pricing, dynamic pricing, demand-based pricing, percentage pricing, contingent pricing. There are so many different pricing models. In fact, there's at least over 40 different ways of pricing. It can sound overwhelming, that. But ultimately, there are only really two ways to price. That's the good news. There are two ways. The first way, number one, is what's called cost-plus pricing. And the other way is value pricing. That's it. There's nothing else. It's cost-plus or value pricing. And all these different pricing models, whether it's hourly rates, whether it's fixed pricing, whether it's menu pricing, contingent pricing, percentage pricing, they are all a form of either cost-plus or value pricing, or sometimes a hybrid of the two. Okay, so everything falls into one of those two categories, or a bit of both. So let's start with cost plus first, because that's the one that's probably a bit easier. Cost plus simply means, in arriving at a price, we look at our costs, we add up our costs, we add on to that a hoped for profit or profit margin, and magically there's our price. And time-based billing, the way that we've priced in the profession in the past, is a form of cost-plus pricing. It's a terrible way to price. Over 100 years ago, the Austrian School of Economists demonstrated why cost-plus pricing is a crazy way to price. And yet, for some reason, the professions, particularly the accounting profession and the legal profession, are clinging onto it. It's a crazy way to price. It's a crazy way because customers hate it. Absolutely hate it, because they don't know what the price is until the hours are added up and the bill's then sent out. Research shows over and over again that accounting firms that use hourly billing make less money, so it's not fair on you either. It's not a fair way of pricing, because when you think about it, the goals of the client and the goals of the accountant are opposed with cost plus pricing. And there are many more problems as well. There are dozens of problems. We need to move away from that. One of the big problems with hourly billing and cost plus pricing is it ignores the customer. It ignores what the customer wants and what the customer values. So what value pricing does is it starts the other way round. It says, what does the customer value? And then we set our price based upon the customer's value. That's essentially what value pricing is. The price is based on how much the customer values something. So in theory, very straightforward and simple. The challenge is it's not as simple as it sounds. And the big problem is we have to understand, well, what is value? What is value? The reason why as a profession I believe that we've clung to timesheets is because it's easy to do. There's a feeling of precision. We're very precise with numbers. And so it feels a precise scientific way of pricing because we just record hours, we add them up, we multiply them by an hourly rate, and magically we have a price. But there are so many flaws in that. And even though there's a feeling of precision, every element in the process, the number of hours, how we arrive at an hourly rate, what we actually bill, recovery rates, is all a work of fiction. And yet we cling on to it because it feels like it's precise. It feels like there's a formula. Unfortunately, there's no such thing as a formula for price. The thing about price is a feeling, it's a judgment. And this is why people struggle to grasp value pricing and what is value. You see, value itself is subjective. You can't touch it, you can't feel it, you can't measure value. And that's the first thing that makes value pricing difficult. We can't measure it. The second thing that makes value pricing difficult is that everybody values things differently. So when we're looking at, for example, pricing a tax return, not only is it impossible to have a precise measure of what is the value to somebody of completing a tax return, but also everybody values it differently. Every client you have would be willing to pay a different price. And the third thing that makes value pricing difficult for our profession, it's easier if you're Starbucks selling coffee, but in our profession, the challenge we have is that we are selling a very complex service, particularly with things like bookkeeping, annual financial statements, payroll, because every client is different. There is different scope of work. So because every client is different, every client needs to have their own unique price to account for their unique needs, their unique wants, the unique circumstances, the scope of the work. So they're the reasons why value pricing is difficult. Value is subjective, we can't measure it, everybody values things differently, and we have a complex service. That doesn't mean, though, that we just give up and go back to the timesheet, because that's a crazy way to price. We have to figure out, well, how do we do that? And one of the things I touched on a few minutes ago was that value it's a feeling, it's a judgment. Everybody values things differently. And so we can't attempt to measure it. Instead, what we do is we want to start to use a number of techniques, pricing systems that will help us to uncover and understand what people value. And the starting point of that is the questions that we ask. I teach a process which I call the 3 stages of the value conversation. When you are talking to a client about a service and pricing, and by the way, that pricing process is a sales process. When it comes to the sales process and talking about price, there are 3 key stages. Stage number 1 is what I call uncover the value. What that means is we have to ask questions, and the right questions, to better understand what's important to clients. What are their goals in life? What are their wants? What are their needs? What are the problems they have right now? What are the pain points? What are the obstacles? What are the challenges they are facing? We have to become better at asking questions. We tend to rush the process of meeting with new clients because we just want to get them signed up. But the reality is, we need to spend more time asking the right questions so we can start to uncover what's important to them and uncover value. Once we've done that, number 2 is we then want to build up the value. And the reason we want to do this is because as a profession, we have always been poor at this. One of the things I find when I talk to people is they tell me they've got price-sensitive clients. And the reality is you do not have any price-sensitive clients in your accounting firm. You absolutely do not. And there's some reasons for that I can go into another day when we've got some more time. Essentially, though, your clients who are entrepreneurs, business owners, high net worth individuals, they're what's called value sensitive. And that's a very different thing. A price sensitive person is somebody who only wants the cheapest. That's not your clients. Your clients are value sensitive. What that means is that they're looking for a profit on the deal. They want to know that when they buy from you, the value of what they're getting is greater than what they're giving up, which is usually the price. They want to feel they're getting more value than the price. And so that means to do that, we have to be better at building the value. That partly means adding more value, making sure what we do is better. But even more important, it's about communicating the value. And the problem is we are poor at that in the profession. We don't use the right language, the right words to communicate value. If you ever give a price to a client or a prospective client and you get that reaction, wow, that's a bit expensive, and I'm sure you have several times. I know I did in my accounting firm many, many times. I got that's expensive. I wasn't expecting that. And my knee-jerk reaction was, as I heard that, I thought, that means they're price sensitive. I need to keep my prices lower. And once we start hearing that reaction from multiple clients several times, once you start hearing people say, that's expensive, we start to then extrapolate in our mind and assume all of our clients are price sensitive, so we best keep our price low because we hate rejection. We hate that that, no, I don't want to buy, that's expensive. We find that awkward. So what happens is we tend to go in low with our prices, which is why as a profession, we're working crazy hard, too many hours for not enough money. So we have to learn how to communicate the value better. So that's number 2. So number 1 is we have to capture the value. Sorry, we have to uncover the value through the questions. Number 2 is number 2 is we build the value by adding more value but communicating it so the client understands it. And then number 3 is we then capture the value, and that means that the value that we create and communicate, we want to capture that in our price. Put it another way, we should not price based on how long the work takes. That's irrelevant. The client does not care how many hours you spend doing the work. No client wants to buy hours from you. There's no inherent value in an hour of your time. Nobody sees value in that, which is why when you quote an hourly rate, the reaction is usually that's expensive. Nobody wants to buy hours. Your clients want to buy your knowledge, a result, an outcome, a solution. They're buying value. And so the more value that we create, the higher the price should be. The trouble is, as I said, value is subjective. Let me try and illustrate with an example. So a couple of decades ago, I forget the exact date, but the airline industry was disrupted by the low-cost budget airlines. And in Europe, you'll probably know, it was Easyjet and Ryanair came along. Now, before Easyjet and Ryanair came along, if you wanted to fly somewhere, you bought an expensive ticket from somewhere like British Airways, and whether you wanted it or not, when you bought that ticket, you got your bags checked in, you had a meal on the plane, you had seats allocated. Easyjet come along, Ryanair come along, and they changed the model. They did what was called unbundling. And what they did is they then said, look, some people can't afford those flight costs. So we're going to have lower flight costs, but then people can choose the other things. And so, for example, one of the things they built in was speedy boarding, which means if you want to be first on the plane, you pay an extra £20, and when you get to the gate to board the flight, there would be 2 queues or lines, the speedy boarding and those that are not so bothered. Now, question for you. The £20 or whatever the figure is that they set for speedy boarding, is that cost plus pricing or value pricing? If you think it's cost plus, put CP in the chat box. If you think it's value pricing, put V. When they price speedy boarding, is it V, value pricing, CP, cost plus? Okay, so let me have a look. Sophia Johnson is absolutely right. Nicholas Charles is absolutely right. Paul is right as well. Yvette is right. David Buttle is right. James is right. Bob's right. Michael's right. Absolutely. It's value pricing. Because if you think about it, how much does it cost Easyjet to supply that as a service, speedy boarding? Nothing. Okay, perhaps they bought a couple of stands and one of those elastic kind of rope things, but other than that, it cost them nothing to let some people on the plane first and some later. So the costs are nothing. You can't cost plus it. If they cost plus it, it's a free upgrade, which would be crazy. They value price it. And what they have done is they test different prices because they know that at whatever price they set, there will be some people that see that the value to them to be first on the plane is more than the £20. And so some people see value in that and they will choose to jump on the plane earlier. There are others that they value the money in their pocket much more and are quite happy to wait. Everybody values things differently. And what Easyjet have done with their value pricing model, that's one of the aspects. They let the customer choose based on what they value. If they value speedy boarding, those customers will choose to take more money out of their pocket and pass it across to Easyjet. Those customers that don't value it will just stick with the cheaper option and just wait. Okay, so that's a little bit about what value really means. Value ultimately is subjective and everybody values things differently. Now, one of the things that we have to be careful of. And I know that in the poll a little while ago, many of you were saying fixed pricing. Just so we understand, fixed pricing this is one of the big myths in the profession. There's a lot of confusion about value pricing, what it really means. Fixed pricing is not value pricing. Fixed pricing is not value pricing. Fixed pricing, the way that most people do it, is a form of cost plus pricing. Okay, you might be thinking, Mark, that doesn't make sense. So let me explain. Let me imagine that you do tax returns and you decide that you have a client coming in, or potential client coming into your office. They want you to do the tax return. And you decide that your price is a fixed price of £500 if you're in the UK. It's a fixed price of 500. That's not value pricing. That's not value pricing. And the reason it's not value pricing is because when firms who do that, I ask the question, so why 500? Where does the 500 come from? And the answer is always this. Well, Mark, based on my experience and my years of doing tax returns, I know roughly how many hours it takes to do a tax return. So what I do is I give the client a fixed price up front based on how many hours it takes typically to do that type of tax return. It's still a form of cost plus. It's still based on our best guess, our estimate of hours. We're still entrenched in the thinking of hourly. Now, fixed pricing, in the US it's often called flat fees. Fixed pricing is a better way of pricing than time-based billing because it's fairer on the customer. In other words, with time-based billing, the customer says, what's it going to cost? We say, well, our rates are £100 an hour. Well, the customer's next question is going to be, yeah, but how long will it take? And we say, we don't know, we haven't done the work yet. But trust us, we're a professional firm of accountants. We keep accurate time records. And when we finish the job, we'll send you a nice itemized bill that will list everything that we've done. That's often been called surprise billing. Some people call it ambush billing. Customers hate it because they don't know the price up front. At least with fixed pricing, we're giving the customer certainty. So they can plan, they can budget. We give them a fixed price up front. Fixed pricing is fairer on the customer, but it's not value pricing. It's still a form of cost plus. You see, one of the things that we need to bear in mind is that a single price is always the wrong price, guaranteed the wrong price. You see, when you have someone come in wanting to buy a tax return service off you, and for that particular type of client it would be you decide your price is 500, what happens is when a customer wants to buy, they have a number that economists call the buyer's reservation price. The buyer's reservation price. Now, this is more commonly referred to as the maximum willingness to pay. Maximum willingness to pay, buyer's reservation price. Everybody has that. There's a number that's the most that we are willing to pay. Now, usually that's somewhere subconscious. Most customers don't think about it. And the interesting thing is when you are having the pricing conversation, you can change in their mind subconsciously and raise, through your communication techniques, the maximum willingness to pay. But there will be a number. And so when you're talking to that client who's looking for you to do their tax return, there will be a number that's the most they're willing to pay. The chances that number is exactly 500 is so remote it's pretty much impossible. The number in their mind, the number they're willing to pay, the maximum, will be either smaller or bigger. If it's smaller, let's say you're having the conversation about your tax return service, and in their mind they're thinking, hey, this is going to be really good. This has got to be, I think, probably about 250, 300. And you then reveal the price at 500, then you're going to lose out because your price is too high. It's above their maximum willingness to pay. You don't make the sale. But even worse is they might be thinking, this will take away so much hassle. This will take away all this stress, this worry. They're going to do this tax return for me. It's going to make my life easier. This has got to be worth 1,000. And then you give the price 500. You've lost out again. You've left money on the table. They would have paid you double. A single price is always wrong. Okay, so we need to We need to change the way that we price. And so one of the things we have to do, and this is one of the foundations of value pricing, everybody values things different. Everybody values things different. The trouble is we don't know what they value because we can't read their minds. And so we have to use techniques to start to uncover what they value and how much they're willing to pay. And one way of doing that, and it's the first strategy I always recommend when people are moving to value pricing, is to use what I refer to as menu pricing. And what that means is giving people choices, giving people options. Customers love choice. We all love choice. So when we give people choice, what that means is, if I just switch to this, what I mean by menu pricing, and you'll have seen this, it's now very common, it means effectively giving a range of different packages or bundles. You'll often see it or referred to as bronze, silver, gold. That's very common. I refer to it as menu pricing. Some people call it bundling, which technically is wrong. Bundling is the process of creating a bundle, but we're going one step further. We're giving a choice of different bundles or different packages. Technically, if you read the textbooks, it's called versioning. But there are many other words and phrases that people use. The good, better, best strategy is another one that you might see from time to time. But essentially what we're doing is we're giving people a choice of different packages. Usually, not always, but usually that's 3 choices. And I call this the magic of 3. And there's a lot of science behind this. It's really interesting that what happens is when as customers we're faced with 3 choices, what happens is most people choose the one in the middle. They choose the one in the middle. And sometimes people call this the Goldilocks pricing strategy, because if you remember the story of Goldilocks and the 3 bears, when she had the porridge, she chose the one that was in the middle. Not too hot, not too cold. And this is the thing. The reason why people choose the middle option is because we learn from the world of behavioral economics that we are, as humans, we are risk averse. And the problem is the 2 on the outside feel more risky. What I mean by that is if I'm a customer looking at 3 choices, the cheapest one, I might be worrying in my mind that if I buy the cheapest one, it might not give me exactly what I'm looking for. On the other hand, if I buy the most expensive one, there's a worry that I might be paying for more than I need. So the middle one feels safest. Now, there's some really interesting stuff we can do around this, and there's actually a formula, a framework where we can start to predict. And when you get your pricing right, as you start to master advanced menu pricing, which is something I teach in the Value Pricing Academy, as we master Value Pricing Academy, there's a formula you want to aim for. You want to get a certain mix between the 3 packages. Because if you find that you set this and everybody chooses the middle one, then your pricing is completely wrong. You don't want that. You want a spread. You want just over half to choose the middle one. Okay? So menu pricing is extremely powerful. We know it works. It's been around for a long time now. There's a science behind it. We know it works because the most successful companies on the planet all use it. If you think about who is the most successful coffee shop on the planet? Starbucks. When you buy a coffee, a latte from Starbucks, how many choices do they give you? 3. They have their tall, which is the short one. I don't kind of get that, but they have the tall. They have the grande and they have the venti. They give you 3 choices. The most profitable company on the planet, Apple, they do it. If you go onto their store to buy an iMac computer, they will give you different options. Why? Because it works. They've tested this. They understand the science behind this. This is extremely powerful because they know that everybody values things differently. So we let the customer choose, just like Easyjet with speedy boarding. Every customer pays a different price. So we test and figure out which price point gets the most number of people, the right proportion of people saying yes. Value pricing is a feeling. It's a judgment. And we have to test. Let me go back to my story. I said to you that I would share my first experience of value pricing. So towards the end of 1999, I met Ron Baker and he explained this concept of value pricing. In 97, 98, 99, I came from a tax background, and one of the services that I offered, I did a lot of, and it was very popular in the 1990s, but I think it still is now, is incorporations. That's where you see a client who's trading as a sole trader, partnership, and there can be benefits, and very often tax benefits, from moving their business, their trade, into a corporate structure. So I call it incorporations. When I started my accounting firm in 96, I did incorporations, and I charged a fee of somewhere between £200 and £250. Let me come back to those sheets of paper in a short while. I'll just turn those off. And the reason for that was because when I worked as a manager in a large multi-partner firm, they were charging, and I was doing incorporations as a manager, they were charging between £300 and £350. So I thought I was clever when I started as a sole practitioner. I thought, Mark, you have less costs. I can do this for £200 to £250. Stupid thing to do, because if you think about it from a value point of view, the value I delivered to my clients when I was running my accounting firm was at least as good as the same value when I delivered as a manager in an accounting firm. Why should I charge lower prices just because my costs are less? Costs are irrelevant. Costs are not important. So I used to quote £200 to £250. And what was interesting is I'd explain to the client about incorporating. They would say, what will it cost? I would say between £200 and £250. And half the time they said, Mark, that's expensive. That's more than I'm expecting. And after a while, I got a bit annoyed about this because I'm thinking, that's not expensive. I used to charge £300 to £350 when I was a manager in a larger firm. That's cheap. But they said that's expensive. And I realized a couple of things. One is that you should never, ever answer the price question with the price. You should never answer the price question with the price. You've got to build up the value first. You've got to build up the value. And the other thing I realized was that different people value things different. So what I did in 99 after I met Ron Baker is I created a really simple pricing system. It was 3 sheets of paper. And it wasn't a bronze, silver, gold. I called it 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. My middle option, the 4-star service, was what I'd always done with incorporations. It was that every client got the same thing. I made that the middle option. And then I created a cut-down version and then a premium one with some extra planning in. I looked at company car planning and did some some numbers, for example. And I described the benefit of each of the 3 on those sheets of paper. Okay, so I could explain what they got. And then I gave the client a choice. But here's the interesting thing, and I don't know if you can read or not how good your eyesight is, but bear in mind I was charging between £200 and £250. I realised I was too cheap. It took me 2.5 years to learn this. I was a slow learner. My entry level one, I made it £350. My middle one, which is what I was doing before, I increased by over 3 times to £750, and my top one at £1250. What I found was a couple of interesting things over the next couple of years. Firstly, I never had anybody say to me ever again, that's expensive. I didn't know why, but I then realized years later it was because I was better explaining and communicating the benefit. But secondly, the interesting thing was over half of people chose the middle one at $750. And also interestingly, and I didn't know why at the time, but more than twice as many chose the premium at $12.50 than the cheap one. Now I understand why, because there's now a science behind it. There's been lots of studies around this. But I found with this one service, I'd increased my price by over 3 times. And the only thing I did different was having a pricing system, using menu pricing and 3 sheets of paper. That was it. This is powerful stuff. And so one of the things you need to be doing, if you're not already, is embracing this idea that clients value things differently. They all have different needs, different wants, and different values. And what we want to do is we want to start to uncover what are they willing to pay? What do they value? And giving 3 choices is a way of doing that, because when we create different options, those people that value and are willing to pay you a higher price, and they value the things in that package, they will choose to buy those things. What you will find is that you might be thinking your clients are price sensitive. They're not. The reason why people say that's expensive is because they don't understand the value. When you say yes, we can do the tax zone, it's 500, they're going to say that's expensive because they don't know the value of it. It's up to us to build up the value, to be better explaining that. And one of the ways we can do it is by having a pricing system where we give people different choices and we walk them through the choices. And then we let them choose which package they want based on their perception of value. Everyone values differently. And when you do this right, what you'll find is that some clients will see value in your premium service. They will choose to buy a more expensive option. If Starbucks only had one latte, one of each drink, and it was a tall latte, that would cost them millions of dollars in lost profit. If you only give the client the one choice, the one option, they can't pay you any more money. But by offering them a grande version and a venti version, some customers choose, they see more value in the bigger one, choose to take more money out their pocket and hand it over. By giving customers choice, those people that see the value of what you do, they will choose to pay you more. You don't have to enforce price rises, you give people choices, so they get to choose. Okay, one of the things I want to do is I have got a few free things for you if you want to learn a bit more. We've still got more to cover, by the way, on this session. We're going to do some questions soon as well. So if you have got questions for me, stick them in the Q&A box, and we'll look at questions in a short while. But I have got a couple of things for you that may help you. So one of the things I did, one of the things that people find really difficult with value pricing is how to price bookkeeping. Because bookkeeping is something, whether you're a bookkeeper, an accountant, accountants now are doing more bookkeeping because of cloud technology. How do we price that? So I did a survey of over 2,600 accountants and bookkeepers in the summer of 2019 to look at how do we price bookkeeping services and how exactly do we come up with the price for bookkeeping. And I wrote a research report, and I'd be happy to send you a completely free copy of that research report if you like it. And I'm going to put the link in the chat box in a short while. I have some other things for you as well if you want. I also wrote an eBook on how to price bookkeeping services. So I'm going to put that in the chat box as well. I also, if you want to learn more about value pricing, I run a training session every single month online. We spend 30 minutes where I teach you something about value pricing, and then I spend 30 minutes answering questions. So if you'd like to join me on my monthly training webinars on value pricing, then one of the links is where you can get on the VIP list. That means that once a month you'll get an email with the topic of that session, and every month the people that show up at the top on the session, they choose next month's topic. I run a poll every month. That means I'm teaching the things that you want to find out about. And fourthly, I also have a Facebook group of just over 8,000 accountants and bookkeepers, all about learning value pricing. So we're going to do some Q&A in a short while, and I'm happy to answer your questions. But I know that we'll have a limited time for Q&A. You may have many more questions. And so I encourage you, join my Facebook group. The link's in the chat box. Just answer the 2 questions. I only let accountants and bookkeepers in, and just say you're on the Practice Ignition webinar. And I'll let you into the group. And then you can ask questions, and you can meet other people who are on this journey getting better results. And last but not least, I have a webinar coming up, a special webinar. I'm actually running it in conjunction with Practice Ignition, and it's one of my star students. He's from Canada, David Pankovic, and one of the things that he does really well, he's going to talk about systems, systemizing his marketing through to pricing, and he's going to talk about how specifically he prices, how he uses menu pricing, all these things to get incredible prices, and how he then links that with Practice Ignition, and then uses Practice Ignition to complete the rest of the process. I'm going to be sending details of that webinar to people in the Facebook group, and when you get on the VIP list for my monthly free training, I'll let you know the date and the details of that. It's in a couple of weeks' time, and that's going to be an incredible session. Dave's going to share so much during that webinar. And finally, last but not least, if you want to connect with me at all on LinkedIn, you are welcome to. I'm easy to find. If you just go to LinkedIn, type in Mark Wickersham. There's not many Mark Wickershams around. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn, and I might have a couple of other things to send you when we connect on LinkedIn.